History is written by the winners. Doesn't matter if it's war, life or wrestling. If you hold all the victory cards, you get to say how the past went down, as mad as that sounds. These are the spoils of battle, however. Given that WWE is most definitely the biggest winner of all of pro wrestling, they do indeed get to take the memories we have, even though some of those memories make you go, wait, what? No. I'm Simon from WhatCulture, and this is 10 pieces of history that WWE loves to change. Number 10, the immediate impact of Austin 316. Sometimes WWE likes to streamline certain events and present them in a more cinematic manner. It just makes sense. Makes everything feel so much cooler. This is clearly the case in their retelling of the Steve Austin story. While Austin's time in WCW, ECW and his early days as the Ringmaster are handled pretty accurately, things fall apart when it comes to the infamous Austin 316 promo. According to WWE documentaries, the basic timeline of this period states that Austin rose to superstardom immediately after his King of the Ring win, but that's ignoring months of Austin still in the mid-card while WWE figured out what they had. In the case of Stone Cold, this approach is a bit silly, as it often skips over some incredible character development that he did during this period, especially with Bret Hart and Brian Pillman. WWE's modern take on the rise of Stone Cold is certainly more dramatic than the actual version, but presenting it in the manner they do downplays the time and effort it actually took to get Steve Austin to the star he'd eventually hit. They put effort in, should pat themselves on the back. Number 9, the importance of the Clique. Shawn Michaels, Triple H, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall and Sean Waltman are all in their own ways important to pro wrestling history. What's significantly less important is their time together in WWE as the Clique. According to the company, this group was revolutionary and it blurred the lines between reality and kayfabe. As for this reputation of blurring the lines, there were very few on-screen instances of that actually occurring. In fact, the one time they definitely did break this down is during the infamous curtain call incident. Of course, that happened at a house show when Hall and Nash were leaving the company, and even then WWE tried to hide that news, and they punished those involved. While the Clique's alleged backstage political poisoning does also get mentioned, it's also justified in a way by the influence the group had, influence that at the time was not as great as WWE would have you believe. Number 8, WWE's homegrown talent. When people talk about the death of WCW, they love to mention that they didn't make their own stars, that relying on other companies' highlights was a big part of their downfall. When you really think about it, how many stars has WWE created largely within their own system while there was other major competition out there? While the company certainly deserves credit for giving us the likes of The Undertaker, Triple H and Steve Austin, the list of talent that came into WWE as unknown or largely unknown became headliners is far smaller. What WWE really likes to downplay is how many of their biggest stars entered the organisation with the characters they had created elsewhere. Hulk Hogan, Roddy Piper, Randy Savage, Ric Flair, Bobby Heenan and Rick Rude. Even in modern times we see guys like Seth Rollins, AJ Styles and Samoa Joe finally get over when they are allowed to use elements of characters they'd established prior to arriving in WWE. To be fair, however, it is the platform Vince McMahon has that helps this no end, and proof that if someone does have a good persona, it's just smart business to focus on that. But borrowing ideas is just a tried and true wrestling concept, so why pretend otherwise? Number 7, Black Saturday. If right now you're asking yourself, what is Black Saturday? It's because WWE has done a fantastic job keeping this historical moment in check. It's a reference to the 14th of July 1984. On that day, Vince McMahon appeared on WCW to announce he had acquired the time slot TBS had previously devoted to Georgia Championship Wrestling, and that this channel would now be airing WWE programming instead. If only for the visual of Vince McMahon appearing on WCW program, this should be a moment steadfast in wrestling history. The reason it's not, though, is because the idea didn't work. As it turned out, the audience that loved WCW also hated WWE and they just didn't want to watch it. While this event does get mentioned briefly in some documentaries, it's been changed so it doesn't look as bad for the WWE as it was at the time, especially because not long after this, they just moved out the time slot again. I get it, you don't shout about your failures. It did happen. Number 6, The Undertaker in the mid-90s. The Undertaker is one of the greatest pro wrestlers ever, and to get to that level you have to have done something awesome for most of your career. You can't just have a short run and be in that category, because you can't really rule out anything Taker ever did. That being said, there are quite a few pieces of dead man history that WWE loves to warp, and they especially enjoy not really mentioning his time during the mid-90s. In the Monday Night Wars documentary episode Foundations of War, The Undertaker's run during this era is described as a time where he established himself as the top guy in the WWE, and how his leaving would have sunk the company. There could be some truth in that, but this was also a time where the Phenom was having lackluster main events against Sid Justice. They weren't exactly lighting things on fire. So again, The Undertaker deserves to be remembered as one of the best, but pretending every year he ever had was a highlight is just silly. Number 5, the Attitude Era Diva Revolution. Go and watch the Monday Night Wars documentary Divas Gone Wild. While you may think this covers how WWE brought in the young male demographic via bra and panties matches, it's actually a unique take on who started the Divas revolution. Here, as we're told, nobody cared about women's wrestling prior to 1996, which just isn't true. Instead though, it was Sunny and Sable walking around in thongs that made people pay attention. Following up from this, Vince McMahon and co start insinuating that by focusing on hiring more attractive performers and allowing them to take their clothes off, they actually empowered female wrestlers for the first time. Never mind that companies like Glow had run for years with nothing but women's wrestling, or that the women's scene in Japan was churning out incredible wrestlers. What we actually needed was G-strings. You think WWE would actually try to hide this era of women's wrestling, especially in the PC world we now live in, but attempting to alter it into a platform for female empowerment is just... well, I'll leave it up to you. Number 4, ECW in the Attitude Era. The rise and fall of ECW is an amazing DVD, but also contradicts a lot of what is said in other WWE documentaries. From the time that the ECW faithful tore into the King of the Ring 1995 with chants of ECW, to the fact that the companies actually invaded each other at one point, Paul Heyman's little wrestling company that could doesn't tend to get a lot of love in retrospectives. The truly bizarre part of this approach, though, relates to WWE's stance on ECW influencing the company's decision to move towards a more mature product and a hardcore in-ring style. Forget the fact that certain elements, characters and storylines of the Attitude Era are directly lifted from ECW. WWE apparently only saw ECW as a niche product, and they were going for a completely different demographic. Why WWE goes to such tremendous lengths to downplay the influence of ECW years after the fact is anyone's guess, especially because they own them now. You won, guys. You won. Number 3, WrestleMania 3's attendance figure. In what is perhaps WWE's most infamous case of revisionist history, the company has long stated the attendance figure for WrestleMania 3 was 93,173, whereas now, most people say the actual attendance was about 78,000. On the surface, this isn't a big deal. Many live events will exaggerate their figures, and it's just kind of accepted that whatever you get told should be taken with a grain of salt. However, this case is a little different because of how it's affected numbers going forward. 93,173 is a ridiculous attendance anyway. There are a few modern stadiums that could possibly support that many people, and few events that could even draw that many fans to them to begin with. What's particularly interesting about that number in relation to WWE though, is that they've actually beaten the supposed figure for WrestleMania 3 multiple times since then. In fact, many people believe they set their actual record just 5 years later at SummerSlam 92 in Wembley Stadium. What a mess that is. Number 2, Owen Hart's treatment post-Montreal. Although certain legal issues keep WWE from really mentioning Owen Hart, whenever they do, they tend to focus on his early tag team success, his incredible feud with Bret Hart, and the tragedy of his death. What is glossed over quite impressively though is what Owen Hart was doing in the months following Survivor Series 97 through to 1999. While it's irresponsible to suggest that WWE was punishing Owen Hart for the departure of Bret, the handling of his character was awful enough to lead many people to that conclusion. From giving Hart the nickname of Nugget in relation to a poo and the blue blazer gimmick, WWE's booking of Owen post-Bret wasn't ideal. In a way, you can't blame WWE for not mentioning the bad times right before Owen's death, but given his skill level, he certainly wasn't being used in the right way. Number 1, the influence of DX compared to the NWO. In WWE's eyes, the NWO changed the business on one side of the coin, DX did the same on the other. That's fair to a point, as many of the group's innovations in terms of presentation would become cornerstones of the era, that is weighed far more heavily with the New World Order than it is D-Generation X. DX was very popular, but at no point drew the kind of ratings that the NWO or Stone Cold Steve Austin did. While the early incarnation of DX was important, their early days did not have near the same impact as Hall, Nash and Hogan. The later DX Army version of the group was a cornerstone of the company at the time, but their regular portrayal as a driving force in WWE's rating dominance is often exaggerated. That's not saying they didn't have their place, because they did, but if you jump into the figures and have a look, the NWO was just far bigger. Numbers don't lie. Hello WhatCulture, my name is Simon Miller, and today I have an announcement so big, so huge, it's gonna shatter the very foundations of your life to the point you may need to phone up a friend and say, I don't even know who I am anymore. I have just heard the news. Have you heard the news? I've heard you out there. I've seen you've been commenting. I've read your tweets, and I can now officially let you know that if you do enjoy Raw ups and downs, if you do enjoy SmackDown ups and downs, that now you'll be able to set your watches to them. You'll be able to make notes in your calendars, because we're gonna have an official time for when they're gonna go live. I know, massive. So ups and downs for Raw will go live at 2 p.m. GMT, that's British time, every Tuesday, and they will go live at 2 p.m. GMT every Wednesday.
for SmackDown. So you don't have to be aimlessly walking around anymore going, what do? I want to know what got up and what got down and what Seth Rollins did or what AJ Styles is up to. Now you know. 2 p.m. GMT Tuesdays, 2 p.m. GMT Wednesdays, ups and downs coming at you in the face. I realise what I just said, retract that, keep moving on, and I hope to see you there soon. And I hope that we build an audience so big that if I ever wanted to march an army anywhere in the world, I could, and we'd call it the Ups and Downs Army, because I haven't come up with a better name.